Hello and welcome to On Leading with Greatness. I'm Jim Salvucci of Guidance for Greatness. This week's installment, you got a lot of nerve. How to use and abuse empathy. Empathy is about standing in someone else's shoes, feeling with his or her heart, seeing with his or her eyes. Daniel Pink. You've heard it. You've said it probably, and so have I. It's a well-worn cliche, but a useful one. The metaphor of standing in someone else's shoes creates such a clear picture in your head. What do things look like from another's perspective, from over there? If you really want to dive deep, try pointing those strange shoes in your gaze at yourself and see how you look from this other person's perspective. Yowza! Most leadership advice suggests that empathy is a key component to effective leadership, and I won't disagree. Leaders empathize to improve their ability to communicate and to compromise, being more fully aware of what others are thinking, feeling, and experiencing, and why allows leaders to connect. Such connection builds and strengthens relationships, which form the pumping heart of leadership. When used wisely, empathy increases our capacity for caring. It can spark us to feel compassion and to lend a hand. Leaders use empathy to build better teams. Leaders model empathy for others simply by practicing it. They also guide others to be more empathetic. This effort bakes empathy into the culture, which makes the whole organization more functional. After all, if you lack empathy, that basic ability to understand how others operate, how can you develop effective teams? All true, and I stand by it. But empathy is not inherently good. Empathy can be a component of morality, but it's not moral in itself. For instance, if you empathize with someone doing harm, you potentially become complicit in that harm. We see it all the time. Even the most callous person can suddenly transform into a wellspring of patient empathy when contemplating the reprehensible activities of their favorite politician. Some people even empathize to condone the bad behavior of bosses. You must understand, they proclaim, she's having a hard day, week, year, lifetime, ancestral bloodline. Everyone is entitled to a rough patch, to be sure. I've had plenty. I also acknowledge that my leadership lapsed during those times. I was not a good leader, although I think I stayed well above the level of crappy boss. My point is that how and why you apply and express empathy is just as important as whether you have the potential for empathy at all. Not all empathy is equal. Positively empathetic. One of the most powerful expressions of empathy exists in a song, Bob Dylan's Positively 4th Street. The 1966 lyrics open with an outcry of pure bitterness, like a mouthful of battery acid. You got a lot of nerve to say you are my friend. When I was down, you just stood there grinning. I wish I could say Dylan's mood improves from there, but every verse of this 4-minute diatribe drips caustic resentment. For instance, don't let this little blast of seeming empathy that appears toward the end deceive you. And now I know you're dissatisfied with your position and your place. Wow, has Dylan sloughed off his own bitterness enough to recognize and acknowledge this other person's bitterness? Perhaps they can be fast fellows bonding over their shared acrimony. Oh, but then he quickly adds, don't you understand? It's not my problem. Empathy offered, empathy denied. Despite all this nastiness, a perfect articulation of empathy explodes into the song in the penultimate verse. I wish that for just one time you could stand inside my shoes, and just for that one moment I could be you. It's such a stirring notion that it repeats himself in the opening of the final verse. Yes, I wish that for just one time you could stand inside my shoes. But Dylan can't seem to wrap up the song without a fatal jab. You'd know what a drag it is to see you. If you're willing to overlook the spite, you'll see these lines perfectly portray empathy, at least in the technical sense. You stand here, and I stand there, so that we can see ourselves from each other's point of view. This full-on adoption of another's perspective constitutes empathy, but only to set up the ending's vicious twist. Notice that Dylan never truly seeks to see himself from the other's point of view. Not at all. Instead, he wants the other person to feel empathy for Dylan, to discover how miserable Dylan feels at the mere sight of this person. In fact, Dylan's game of switcheroo attempts to force empathy on another while experiencing none himself. It's a non-consensual imposition, reverse or anti-empathy booby-trapped with a landmine of an insult. The morality of empathy. Dylan's song really gets to the heart of various potentials of empathy. Again, empathy, no matter how critical to good relationships and leadership, is neither moral nor immoral in itself. We can see from Dylan's lyrics that how one deploys empathy alone determines its moral caliber. Furthermore, as Dylan indicates, empathy can be imposed, or maybe a better word is extracted. This is what happens when someone excuses a boss's bad behavior with a strident, "You have to understand." Do I? Why? Why should I have to stand in the boss's shoes if the boss, being a boss, won't do the same for me? Even Dylan, at his bitterest, proposed an even exchange of footwear. In contrast, leaders seek to empathize first. Then maybe they'll ask for understanding. But one-way, bottom-up enforced empathy is not the only means to abuse it. Some bosses can genuinely empathize, just not for the better. Leaders, as opposed to bosses, empathize to come to an understanding, to discover the best in people, and to establish relationships that will result in compromise and collaboration. In contrast, while most bosses don't or can't empathize, many bosses who empathize do so to find advantage. You've probably seen this yourself, the boss who truly grasps where their team members are coming from, only to use it against them. This effort can take a variety of forms, which are generally indistinguishable from gaslighting and other forms of bullying. For instance, one of my former bosses was superb at sussing out people's motivations. He could really empathize with the ones driven by raw ambition, since he shared that driver. His victims proved easy to manipulate. Apply some encouragement here, display a soupçon of disappointment there, add a little reward from time to time, and soon enough the boss had them dancing at the ends of his strings. On the other hand, the ones driven by a desire to do the right thing seemed opaque to him. They were obstacles and expendable. In these cases, his inability to relate or to empathize with do-gooders was an indicator that they would be loyal to the institution or to principles, not him. Another way bosses use empathy is by doing like Dylan at the end of his song and extracting it. A different boss I knew would co-opt the language of her team members to lull them into believing she empathized with them. This pseudo-empathy then induced her team members to empathizing with her and adopting her perspective. No matter how devoted, though, eventually they'd wear down. As soon as they turned less useful to her, she would discard them. The typical team member's hunger for the boss's empathy allowed her to get away with this stunt for decades. For all I know, she still pulls it. Empathy, both her insincere edition and their genuine but misdirected version, got her the control she wanted. The color of empathy. Perhaps you're thinking, well, that's not real empathy. If so, I disagree. If empathy is an ability to understand others' emotions and thoughts, to see things from their perspective, these bosses I described certainly practiced and used it rather effectively. Remember, empathy lacks any inherent moral color. It's neither good nor bad. Empathy operates as a tool, not a quality. As with any tool, its use and usefulness depend on the hand that wields it. A hammer can create or demolish. Bad bosses can use empathy just as well as great leaders. The only difference really is that one does so for nefarious reasons, to manipulate, control, and gain power over others, and the others for constructive reasons, to communicate, build relationships, and reach consensus. Of course, Not all bosses are even capable of practicing empathy, but all leaders must be to some degree. They do it all the time for the reasons I mentioned. Let me leave you on a more positive note, lest you think Dylan was an utterly unempathetic jerk. Here's another, perhaps more satisfying taste. In the song One Too Many Mornings, written in 1963, he describes a tense exchange with his lover. It's a restless, hungry feeling that don't mean no one no good. When everything I'm saying, you can say it just as good. You're right from your side, I'm right from mine. I can't think of too many 22-year-olds who could have the wisdom to write something that beautifully empathetic. In fact, empathy is a hallmark of great art. Artists, like leaders, empathize to understand and create. Bosses who can empathize do so to manipulate and destroy. Recall that the deepest enlightenment empathy offers comes not when you see things as someone else does, but when you see yourself as they do. It's virtually the opposite of what Dylan puts forward at the end of Positively 4th Street. And a level of awareness and wisdom I certainly have not attained yet. The main takeaway I want to emphasize is that we'd be wise to avoid endowing empathy with some inherent quality, good or bad. As we see with Dylan's different approach, empathy is no virtue, nor is it an evil. It's just a tool, and like any tool, its value flows from its use and its user. How empathetic are you? How do you use or express empathy? Leaders use empathy to understand others to build relationships, and I can help. Unlock the great leader within. Download my free resource, the Transform to Greatness Toolkit now at thegreatleadershiptoolkit.com. I look forward to hearing from you.